The Archdiocese of Chicago is a vibrant and diverse faith community. We celebrate our faith through worship, evangelization, and reaching out to the needy. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Welcome to Diakonia, a call to service. Diakonia is the Greek word for service, also the root word for deacon. This show is dedicated to talking about how we are all called to service, all the faithful called to service, living out our baptismal commitment as priest, prophet, and king. I'm Deacon Jim Norman, Vicar for Deacons with the Archdiocese of Chicago. Delighted to be here with you today, along with our co-host, Deacon Dave Brencic, who's the Associate Director in the Permanent Office of the Diaconate. We're joined this morning by Deacon Tom Lambert, who's co-chair for the Chicago Archdiocese Commission on Mental Illness. Tom, welcome.
Welcome, Tom.
Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. We've titled this, and we're here to discuss, and we've got an expert here to help us discuss the loneliness epidemic. But before we do that, I'd like to we'll invite Dave to ask some initial questions.
Welcome, Tom. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, some of your background, please.
Well, I'm been a deacon for 40 years now, and married, have 4 daughters. Our oldest daughter has a serious mental illness, and we have 9 grandchildren. So we are delighted with our family and involvement with them. But for the past 30 years, I've been involved in mental health and mental illness ministry to people with mental illness and their families. And that's been a wonderful ministry in terms of meeting people and just accompanying people in their journey. And sometimes those journeys can be pretty rough. So it's a wonderful grace to be there for them and with them and what they have taught me about life's challenges.
Tom, in preparation for this episode, I was doing some reading, and you shared some articles as well. One of the articles that I had come across said that Generation Z, 12 to 27, that might have some of our grandchildren in that group, the most diverse cohort ever, has a lower rate of teen pregnancy, a lower rate of alcohol use and abuse, but alarming rates of loneliness, depression, and suicidal thoughts. Speaking of those who are 50 to 80 years old, some of us on this broadcast perhaps, it says that from 27% experience of loneliness in 2018, it moved over the pandemic period in June of 2020 to 56%, and it remains still at higher than pre-pandemic levels. So the question, before we kind of tackle this notion of a loneliness pandemic, Tom, from your perspective, how do we define loneliness?
Well, loneliness, the Surgeon General, who has come out with reports recently highlighting just what you were talking about, he has defined it as loneliness occurs when connections a person needs in life are greater than the connections they have. And the other point he makes, and I think this is what I have found in my ministry, is that it's so subjective that not everyone feels loneliness in the same way or for the same reason. And what that says to me is that, especially from a faith community standpoint, how we can help is getting to know people and where they're coming from. And there are a lot of issues that are out there. But what I run across, I would say the top issues that I see are people feeling disconnected. So they may be feeling disconnected for a variety of reasons within their life. Maybe something, a move, a job change, or they've lost friends, they've lost a relationship. So it's that disconnection. And because of the disconnection, then they feel more isolated. So that's another issue for many, many people. They just feel isolated. And part of that is that nobody understands what they're going through. And one of the things I have found over the years of ministering to people with mental illness and families is that when we have first contact with each other, they express the same thing, that nobody understands what they are going through, and yet a lot of people are going through the same thing. So again, it's about connecting people up and making those connections to understand that we are more connected than people think. And so I think there's three kinds of loneliness, if you will, and it's always hard to define it exactly. But there's a psychological loneliness when people don't feel, and gets to the Surgeon General's comment, that they don't feel that there's someone out there that they can talk to. Maybe they've lost that connection, and they don't have that person they can trust in. And their social action, again, because maybe of the pandemic, we are more on Zoom than we are in person. So they don't feel that there is that, and don't have that social connection. And the other is societal type of loneliness. And unfortunately, we're living in a world that is more disparate from one another, the more disconnected. The ideologies are getting further right and further left. And so there's this disconnect among people being able to talk to one another. I mean, we've seen high levels of anger, high levels of people calling out other groups or whatever, and disparaging other groups. So the hatred, the stigma of having a mental illness, and people don't understand, what people are going through, whether it be a race issue, a disability issue, whatever it might be. And then I think very importantly, and at the root of it all, is the spiritual loneliness, the disconnect from God. I think there's a big spiritual loneliness there that occurs in people who, they've fallen away from religious services, from going to church. So there's this disconnect, and they may feel they're spiritual, and they are, everybody is spiritual, but how do we make that connection to God in a way that is meaningful and gives us purpose? And that's what I think the church does.
Tom, I just wanted to, you repeated it several times, this notion of connectedness, feeling connected either psychologically, socially, spiritually. And I'm thinking, the contradiction in my head, I'm going, well, we're more connected now than ever. But is there, so it seems to be a contradiction, but perhaps there isn't from your experience and from your work. Can I compare my likes to what I'll call my loneliness quotient?
Well, you mean your likes on Facebook?
Yeah, my likes on Facebook, or how many tweets I get or retweets I get. That does that help me feel less lonely?
No.
Or is that just
I don't
surface?
think so.
Is it just on the surface and not
And
really?
and I like likes on Facebook. There's no question about it. But I think I think first of all, true connection comes when we use all the senses to connect to one another. So it's more than just seeing something or even just hearing something. It's using all our senses. And there is, I think, in person that's what happens. And so what has happened with the Zoom and the meetings that we do over line is that we don't get the nuances of relationships. We don't get the in-between conversation, if you will, in a meeting. And then when we go online, I mean, Facebook, I think, can be one of the biggest creations of loneliness, because when I go online, I see what all these people are doing, having fun, right? And so then we make comparisons. Well, gee, they're having such a great time in, wherever it might be. Why am I not having that great time? Why do I not feel like they feel, which is a snapshot in one, 5 second or 10 second part of their lives. So we don't see there's no sharing of the other part of our life, where maybe we're struggling with an issue. So there's not that opportunity to get together in person or even, on social media, of sharing that. So I think social media, like anything that we create in this world, there's a blessing to it and there's a dark side to it. And we have to be aware of that. That's the key issue for me, is you got to be aware of what these things are bringing. How can we use them to be to the good, like what we're doing here in terms of a Zoom meeting, but also what's the dark side? What can disconnect us?
And I was going to say, I know, Dave, there may be something you wanted to add, but there seemed to be a consistent correlation between use of the virtual tools and the technology, Facebook, X, and Instagram and other things, and the increase in depression and loneliness. Like we go to those places to try to fill something that those places can't fill.
Yes.
You talked about spiritual loneliness, and I just wanted to come back to that for a second. For those who said, I'm spiritual, but I'm not going to church, I'm not engaging in any kind of community in any way. What about, I was thinking about those that are, frankly, unchurched.
Well, yeah, and that's the key, because again, you're disconnected from who I believe we are at the root. We are animated by our spirituality. So we're more than just physical beings. We are spiritual beings, and that is really what animates us. And so how do we discover that? How do we improve on that? How do we connect in ways to other people so that we can feel the presence of God? So I think, I always like to say prayer and so on is more than just the intellectual process of understanding or trying to understand how and who God is in our lives, but it's from the heart. It's our feeling of God's presence in our lives. And one of the most powerful ways, it's been my experience in these 30 years of ministry, both with people who have mental illness and with their families, but also in the parish in general. And the parish I'm part of is a very diverse parish with elderly, with young college people and all that. So it's the connection that we have to them that helps root in us the presence of God. So we know God is present to us, but how do we feel God's present to us? Well, it's when I sit down with somebody across the table and we talk about our faith life. So we all are unique individuals. We all have unique relationships with God, but how do I learn to improve that relationship or work on that relationship? Just like any relationship, any human relationship, we're talking to God. We're trying to understand how God and us interact. And so we are needing to connect that relationship with God through our connection to one another and how other people, that's what the community of faith to me is about, is we learn from one another. And we learn because people are different in our community. And when we learn what, they say, what they experience, how they pray, it helps us, and we help them, of course.
We'll take a break and we'll come back and talk about other things that we can do for ourselves and others to erase the loneliness epidemic.
Cup that I must drink. Are you willing? Can you be baptized like I have been baptized? Are you able? Are you able?
Do you have an old bicycle that's not being used? Consider donating it to Catholic Charities Veterans Bike Project of Lake County. Skilled volunteers are refurbishing bicycles to make them safe and ready to be used by veterans to get to and from their new places of work. We also gratefully accept financial contributions that are used to purchase bike helmets and other safety accessories. Our veterans have faithfully served the United States, and now it is our privilege to serve them. For more information on the Veterans Bike Project of Lake County, call 847-782-4219. That's 847-782-4219.
People always say, how can you spend your day with 3-year-olds? Seeing the changes that they go through and just the journey and how they grow, this is a very rewarding job. Even though at the end of the day, we're not the highest paid people on earth. And when I have a parent contact me and say, my child loves school, that to me, I'm setting that foundation for their love of learning. Because really, you are changing lives, you are molding lives.
Shape the next generation of leaders. Teach. Apply today at archchicago.org/schooljobs.
Welcome back to Diakonia. This is Deacon James Norman, Vicar for Deacons with the Archdiocese of Chicago, here with Deacon Dave Brencic, Associate Director for the Office of the Diaconate, along with Deacon Tom Lambert, who's co-chair of the Chicago Archdiocese Commission on Mental Illness. We're talking about the loneliness epidemic.
Tom, so what can we do when we find ourselves, lonely or depressed? Any specific things we can try to work on?
Well, I think it starts with talking about it and reaching out to others to get help, especially if it's a debilitating type of loneliness. And one of the issues I think we have as a society is we don't talk about these issues enough. So this current crisis that we're going through, we have actually had a mental health crisis in our country for quite a while. And part of the reason is that we don't talk about these issues and what are affecting people from a mental health perspective. There's a whole stigma surrounding that. So I think if we feel that way, it's important to reach out to other people and to recognize the symptoms. So to learn about it, to talk about it and to learn about it and to then take an action. I would say to have a plan. There's certain, from a faith perspective, certainly, there's a, a prayer each day that my wife, a spiritual director, has written, which is on our website. And that's a way of appreciating with gratitude what the gifts of God have given us. And we can pray these 10 things. There's just 10 sentences, but they're a meditation on the gifts that God has given us. So it's reaching out to others. And sometimes it's hard, of course, to do it, especially if you're feeling lonely and you're feeling depressed. And so I think as churches and as people of faith and as neighbors, we hopefully can identify people who are going through these kinds of issues and reach out to them, because again, it's that connectedness to one another. So if we can find ways of maybe it's someone living next door, maybe it's a person that comes to the parish, and we can do things in the parish. We can preach about loneliness. We can put in we have a page in our bulletin about faith and mental health, and publish articles on this stuff in the bulletin. So I think that's important that we just talk about it more.
Tom, what are some of the telltale symptoms or signs that someone is struggling or depressed that we could be on the lookout for, say, for people in the parish?
Well, I mean, there's a lot, but certainly if you don't see anybody anymore, if somebody regularly comes to the parish, and then all of a sudden you don't see them, I would, try to find out why they're not coming, or if there's a mood change, a personality kind of going from a very happy, gregarious person to a person who doesn't talk or doesn't participate like they used to. So things like that, I think, are keys. And then if you know that a person has had a loss in the family, so our grief groups in parishes can be tremendous helps to people who have gone through loss, or people who don't feel accepted, because of their race, because of their culture, because of their orientation. We can be tremendous help to people just by them knowing that we are willing to listen. And we listen, by affirming God's grace in them, that they are blessings, and that everybody has dignity, everybody has value, and listening with understanding, and be sensitive to what the person is going through. So I think, we got to avoid things like saying, oh, I know exactly what you're going through, and I went through the same thing, and all of a sudden your listening becomes a story about you, right? Yeah. And we fall into that trap. So we listen to the person, affirming what we hear, not what we are going through, because everybody is different, and so we have to appreciate their difference.
Are there resources that we could take advantage of to try to help ourselves or to help others?
Yes, certainly our website, the National Catholic, the Association of Catholic Mental Health Ministers is, and the website is www.catholicmhm.org. And our Chicago version is the same thing, only /Chicago after .org, CatholicMHM.org /Chicago. So on there are a lot of resources, and one of them is that each day prayer that I mentioned that Rita wrote. But there's also prayers and novenas there for people who are having mental health issues. And then there's also resources for reaching out to if there's a crisis, and especially that's important, I think, to recognize if there is a crisis going on so that people can call the various hotlines that there are available. There's a suicide hotline. Illinois has uh, a line. Let me just see if I can find the exact one here, but it's um, the 988 line. So the 988, and there it is. It's coming up there. Yeah. 988 is a line. If you're in crisis, that's the line to call. If you know someone's in crisis, you should call 911 or one of the emergency lines. There's also a warm line, which is a very interesting phrase because it is warm when you call it in the sense that it's somebody to talk to. It's not necessarily the 988 line, but it's a line that you can talk to anybody. It's anonymous. They will refer you to resources. So again, I think it's very important that you educate yourself as much as you can. When we first went through our crisis with our daughter and her mental illness, one of the first things we did was we found everything out about her mental illness. And so if we are going through loneliness, I think it's important to find out everything about why that is and what can we do to make a plan to help us work our way through that. And the plan will include prayer. It will include learning about what particular issue is that we're dealing with, and then an action step that will help us to get through that.
We've got just about a minute left. I know there's an upcoming conference. Could you tell us a little bit about that? And I believe it's on your website as well.
We are having a conference in Mundelein, Illinois. The dates are April 25th and 27th, and this is for people interested in mental health ministry, ministering to those people and their families. So you don't have to actively be involved in it now, but this would be a good way to learn about what we can do. There's people from across the country. Bishop John Dolan is going to be there. He's the Bishop of Phoenix. He has had suicide in his family, two siblings. And then we're going to talk about trauma-informed parishes. So a lot of loneliness comes out of the trauma that occurs in people's lives. So the more we're informed about that as a parish. Rita and I are going to talk about our 30 years of experience in ministering to that population. And then there's going to be the executive director of the National Catholic Partnership on Disability coming. There's going to be a professor from the University of San Diego, Catholic University, that teaches courses on it. So there's going to be a lot of people there, including local Chicago people who are doing things in parishes now, who will be speaking at this conference. And again, you can get more information on that from the website. But I would encourage people who are interested in this kind of ministry, especially deacons and their wives.
Tom, we are running out of time. Thank you, though. We've got your website up. We've posted that. People can go back and refer to it. Thank you for all the work you're doing in the Archdiocese of Chicago. God bless.
Thanks, Tom. God bless.
It's good to be with you. Thanks.